my main sort of concern in a way is that I really wanted it to still feel like theatre, and to me it did. That's the thing that I feels really exciting. I don't feel like we're you know, sometimes when you watch stuff on screen, it's trying to be film and it's not quite getting there, or it's trying to be certain things and it's not. Whereas this really opened up a world for us that we could use different techniques that felt really uh, you could feel the set wobble, you know. I really, that's what I really liked about it. Watching your hands, Caroline, putting things on and sliding things off is the sort of the equivalent of knowing that you're watching a set that's been made. It does something that feels really, has that visceral feeling to it. As well as sort of having these really nice different size things and, you know, all of playing around with that. So I'm really, for me, there is, and I know, Dave, we've both been talking about that. We are interested in us thinking about next steps of using the technology, just because it has sort of, it felt really right with the type of work that we were sort of developing. I think it's been a very happy coincidence that you wrote to Improbable and then Catherine suggested it to us, and then everyone got assembled. So I'm thrilled with that, because I had no idea when we started whether this was going to be a good fit or not, or what it was. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so
Absolutely.
true. That is how it. I don't know if Nina and Caroline know this, but we're just done the lab, and then I got this email from Paul about this project, just like completely separately and out of the blue, about the Telepresence stage stuff, and I was like, hold on a minute.
Serendipity. That's what it is.
Yeah, very. We were still like, you know, at the end of the race, like catching our breath after the end of Outside the Frame, like the Catherine's like, hey, do you want to do this other thing? And we're like, do we?
Really great. It's a really good opener to this, because I think I'm probably trying to think where I answer. I've got some questions for you, but we've kind of already hinted at those already. And I think it's, I'm just going to glance over here because I have it on the screen with my questions on, but that's a really good opener to these questions. And I think, you know, I just trying to pick a question here to start with. What's the best place to pick to sort of riff off what you've just been saying there, and to sort of, I think one of the things we're really interested in this project is how you, not only from the point of view of the content of your piece, but in life, how you fit in the kind of reality, phenomenological experience of being with people, how you feel this is different, what that sort of, what do you reflect on and remember of the sessions that you've done, looking back now, as a kind of group? Do you think about being together? Do you think about being isolated? How does it differ from maybe using other kinds of approaches to this?
You're kind of pulled in, to be honest. I'm not gonna lie. When I was telling my friend who came to watch it, I was saying to her, because we had so much to squeeze into such a short amount of time, and we were also trying to really get some really strong content in there, I was always constantly trying to like work on that positioning thing of trying to get used to like, oh, Angie's over here, Cassie's over here, let me like get used to what it is to like be talking to them as if they're here. And that often, like, not, yeah, definitely numerous times there were times where I'd sort of just forget that actually they weren't there. Like, and so, then that could be quite like disorienting. But you do get really pulled into, as long as everyone's in, you do get pulled into it. Like, you do really have a feeling of sharing an energy, which I was surprised that I was able to feel, which is really cool. Yeah,
that's a really cool thing, isn't it? And I think one of the things that unlocked that was having being able to see them both left, right, and front. Do you think?
Exactly.
That really unlocked it, didn't it? Because I mean, the first session, I thought, gosh, they're going to have to do an extra layer of acting to make it us believe that they're all in the same space. But then by the time you got the screens, it was like night and day different, because you basically I just forgot that you weren't in the same space.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And you have to sometimes remind the audience at the very start. They just remind you they are all in different locations. But it's a funny
Nina,
thing how you.
How's that for you? Because you weren't in the same digital space. So did you have a feeling of like some people were together and you were remote?
Well, it felt quite like a tech actually. So me sitting in the auditorium, really, weirdly, and sort of, and also like, you know, watching Caroline working was, yeah, like watching, as you say, like watching stage crew assemble something, but like sitting back and noting it and like putting content into the mix. It was very similar to the tech process, weirdly enough.
Awesome.
It was interesting as well how
I think
I was going to say it was interesting how.
a few times.
Oh, hello.
Oh, sorry, Caroline, you go.
Yeah, it was interesting as well how quickly, you know, first of all, when I first kind of joined you, I was mind blown. But then I was like, wow, you can do this. It looks really amazing. Whoa. And then it's interesting how quickly your brain and you kind of suddenly go, oh yeah, I'm in it. And and the layers sort of dissolve, because I know the whole thing, you know, technically, obviously it's layer upon layer upon layer. But just as those layers dissolve kind of visually, they also dissolve kind of energetically, if you know what I mean. I think it's a bit like what Ade was saying. It's like you forget that you're kind of separate, and it does become like it's so close, as Nina has also said. You just feel like you're in the performance with other people. It's so interesting. It was an unusual and interesting kind of physical experience. It really is, because you're sitting there separate, but actually you're so when I was moving things about, I thought, God, I'm so involved here. Shit, I've got to get that into the right angle and move that and make sure that she's, make sure that, that Cassie is sitting not in a window, but sitting on the edge of the road, and, and placing all of these things. It's just so interesting. It's such a, kind of weird thing about how your brain just accepts it, and visually the eye and brain kind of and hand connection, for me personally anyway. Yeah.
Great. Angela, you're going to add to something, I think.
Yeah, I think I was just going to do a bit of wittering that wasn't very interesting, which was just about until we actually did the performance thing, my head was quite often in a directing sort of mode rather than being in, which means I didn't really take in quite enough of, so it was a little bit of a shock when we did it, of trying to work out where everyone was, because I'd sort of had outside eye for quite a bit. But I think that thing of getting used to it very quickly in some ways, I think the 3 screens was phenomenal. I think that is definitely a sort of a take forward thing. The getting used to it means that when you're in a real theatre, when there is an issue, fixes usually quicker, and so suddenly realizing that a fix might mean, as you would say, Paul, well, actually that's 40 minutes work. I think it would be quite helpful in some ways further down the line to sort of understand the process a little bit more, so that when we make requests, we know what we're requesting. There's a difference between can you paint something, Caroline, and Caroline will know whether she can or not in the time given. But when we're talking, and we've got a bit of an idea even what that means, but when it's something technical and it's about the latest thing and we don't really understand, and so there's something of that I sort of felt I might like to at some point sort of understand that process a little bit more, so that when you know what requests to make or not to make, and when things have got to be decided by. And I think is partly that tech thing that you were talking about, Nina, which is really interesting. It felt like it being at a tech. I've really felt that as well, where you sort of you're seeing the pieces being pulled together, and that's really exciting. But I do think knowing the process a little bit more would or how that works a little bit would be helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think I came up against, there were a couple of things, especially when we were really consolidating what the show was, that I became clear about the process, and it might be good to sort of at some point, possibly not in this meeting, but pick through that, because things like when a scene is doing a thing, how connected is it to all the other instances of those scenes, or is it completely disconnected and you need to go and copy and paste, like things that we use in theatre, like tracking of elements and that sort of thing, are perhaps not something that exists in the same way in the software. And it might be that this all results in a development list for the people who do supply the software, but they might also go, yeah, well, but we don't care about that particular feature. The vmix, that thing. But I mean, I guess it's just it's a case of us going, well, we know that's the case, so how can we make this more efficient? Do we not make a new scene? Do we just go back to the previous scene? Because then actually anything we change within that scene, and can we go backwards and forwards within the cue list, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. I'm wondering whether you're talking about sorts of skills and resources, and just from that point of view, I wonder whether what kind of skills and resources, human resources and technical, do we need in the future in theatre as we move forward? Are there new skills? Are there new kinds of platforms? Oh, Henry's just joining us. Let me just invite Henry in.
I mean, it's happening all the time, and yes, like, hi. We're just talking about new skills in the theatre, and I'm obviously very, very keenly aware of this. And normally what happens is that the new tech arrives from somewhere else, like corporate or rock and roll, and then eventually it becomes affordable in theatre, by which time we might or might not have made our own version, met them in the middle. But at the moment, people working in theatre are starting to require gaming skills, game design, live rendering, and it's become a lot more complex. It's a bit more like working in broadcast from my perspective. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't just apply to things that involve video. It applies to automation. It applies to puppetry. There's and I mean, the thing is, there's a section of theatre where new skills are being required, but there's also a section of theatre that just needs a tungsten light bulb and a chair. So anyone who goes, oh, I'm really terrified, like that I won't keep up within theatre, and it's like, just make your own theatre though, just do your thing. Like outdoor arts is still a thing. They might use loads of tech, they might not use loads of tech. Outdoor arts is a thing,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, there's almost an even more basic level as well around like when we did Bambino, we did a digital adaptation of our opera for babies during lockdown, partly because that was one of the things that we could do during lockdown, and there was, so we made it in a like, it was like the show that happened live, and then there was live illustration. But there was a sort of role that we worked with a film company called Chocolate Films to stream it, and they were great. But there was a sort of role that's like a director for deciding which cut goes where. Like, when do you...
A vision director, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like and Phelan has never done that before, so that was a kind of new thing for him that eventually he was kind of happy to step into, but to start with he was like, should that be me? I don't know what that means. And there's a kind of so there's a sort of somewhere between a director, a stage manager, and an op that is this role that has some streaming knowledge, this like pretty basic streaming knowledge can operate. We ran it through vMix, so can run vMix kind of like a company stage manager who can also opt and also knows a bit about QLab and also like, you know, that makes this kind of very basic setup that is around digital access to things rather than, which is different from this project, but I think that is going to be something that comes more and more for little projects as well. And like more and more people want to film or capture things in a way that I don't think we used to do before, and it's the same sort of technology that like end on doesn't feel good enough anymore. Like one camera like doesn't really do it.
And it's true, you're right, that actually sometimes these new skills are being borrowed from other places, but sometimes there just isn't quite that combination there. And as you're right, it's sort of like a vision director, but also a stage manager, a digital stage manager in a sense, I guess, which is sort of what you were, Paul.
Yes, by accident, really. But I mean, I think, you know, but I'm more, you know, and I think that's what have been the challenges for us, is actually being able to be in a position to act quickly and help and deliver these projects, but trying to be as hands off as much as possible, and that's obviously quite difficult. There is a bit of a tech learning curve, and there is a gap there perhaps in that. It's like in my field, in arts, we are looking, you know, where do arts and coders meet? You know, we need to bring them around, we need to bring them together. Where do the sorts of the people that can write code and the people that can create aesthetics and visual and different sorts of forms come together? So this is the, of course, I'm sure you all encounter that with all your own work in different ways. I'm wondering,
quite a lot.
Sorry, go ahead.
There's a big distinct, I mean, I remember when I was working in broadcast, there was, you know, there's quite often a big difference between the people who have the dramaturgical approach and oversight and the people who are able to realize that. Like sometimes you work with a 3D animator and they will literally make the exact thing that you've said, and it's with no interpretation, and you're like, oh wow, okay, so that is not at all what we need. And so then you have to sort of learn how to describe to them what you're after, in what terms, but then equally they have this huge knowledge and smartness around how they're able to make these things out of nothing, and you as an art director sort of have to, you know, that you just don't have that, so you do have to marry up those skills, don't you?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that Angela mentioned at the beginning of this, I think, was really interesting, and how close this felt like theatre. That's been really one of our intentions, is that we wanted to create an environment that was fit for purpose, whereas we felt that sort of being newsreaders like this is not really fit for purpose at all. Things that like present like head and shoulder shots. This technology was developed for kind of what they used to call business conferencing. You know, that's what it was kind of developed for sort of people to sit around a table or a sense or to meet. But we're not all newsreaders, and we don't want to be. And so I hope this feels, and it's great to hear you talk about that, Angela. I wonder whether maybe Cassie and Ade will say a little bit more about that sense of their experience of face-to-face theatre and this space, and what the similarities and differences are really.
Go on, Cassie, you haven't said much today.
Hello. Yeah, I found it actually as a performer very different from theatre. Maybe because I don't have a technical bone in my body. So there were like often times where I felt like a bit overwhelmed, or like not really sure how to I don't know how to explain, like how to create, because I couldn't fully understand what that would entail technically. So when Angela spoke about maybe understanding the technology more, that maybe would have been helpful for me to understand like how you make stuff, because I think my brain, like even when we were like doing the scene that I was in, the washerwoman, and I was trying to figure out how do I make the scroll come out from something, and in my head I was like, I just have to have a thing that looks like a basket and it's covered in green, because that was the level of how much I understood the technology at that point. And Ade was like, no, you can totally just like, you know, pin this up and it can then just, and I was like, whoa, like that's just blowing my mind that I don't have to think so literally about it. So I think that like maybe understanding how things worked would have helped me be a bit more freer. But at the same time, it was really strange because when I was watching it back as well, I did feel like, oh my gosh, it did feel like theatre, like things went wrong, and it's like one point where I came in the scene that wasn't supposed to be there, and I was just like, oh yeah, it did have that real like, you know, things are going wrong, but at the same time, like it was a completely different experience as well. I'm trying to think what else. I felt like for me sometimes when I was able to like think creatively were the moments where I was able to like when we like were removed from the technology a bit. I think it was just because my brain was just so like I don't really know how to create in this space, so I have to kind of remove myself a bit, think creatively out of the space and come back into the space. So yeah, I think maybe if we had like more time for like a performer like me, it would have been helpful. But at the same time, I feel like I've learned so many new things from this project that and new skills, and like I just had the most incredible experience with technology, and it's kind of made me be like, okay, yeah, how would I want to use technology moving forward with like the theatre that like I have been doing. So yeah, that's just some of my observations.
That's really interesting. Really interesting.
It is, and also kind of really helpful thinking about like how do you support processes like this? Like how much we can have this we'll have this conversation when we know what we want to do next, but like you know, does it need I feel like the idea that you would just do a kind of long rehearsal process in here feels like it would be like putting people into a really exhausting tech situation without enough time. It feels like it would need to be like little bursts of work, time to work, little bursts of work, time to work, whatever. And maybe even time in a room without any of the tech that is focused on story or images or because actually it does need to be planned to a certain extent in order to flow, because everything has, at least some of it, in my understanding of what's going on, gets queued up. So it's almost so it does kind of need that kind of need some kind of structure to it, but also some kind of structure in how you create it in the first place that blends time with the tech, understanding of the tech, and time away from the tech that is more about narrative and the dramaturgical kind of side of it. So it's really interesting to hear.
Yeah,
so generally
I need a bit more making time in between, it certainly wasn't a thing that fitted into the workshop days, which I think I knew anyway was going to be the case, but it was then just trying to find the right look in the right time in between those days. There was a challenge.
We actually didn't have very much time, so we didn't really, I mean, we didn't rehearse is the truth of the matter, and so I mean we met, but we were writing some stuff, we read out to each other, what do you think, can we put this together? We spent our time doing a little bit of that, and in a way that thing that you're suggesting, Catherine, about rehearsing and actually having some time away from the tech, I think would be really helpful. I think that would really make a big difference in terms of working on our style and not having to think about all of that. I think the other thing is we can't look into each other's eyes, and a lot of improvisation. You get signals from each other all the time through eye contact. You know that thing, Paul, that you were saying about try not to speak over each other, because what happens when you do, the sound cuts in a funny way. Well, when you're improvising, you look at each other and you check your eyes. You know when people are starting and stopping a bit. You know how to judge things a bit more. You're able to just visually shift things in terms of emotions or something like that it's very different when you're not looking. So in that way, it does have that telly thing about it, that imagination. But if you've done some of that work in a rehearsal room, we'll have that sense memory of looking in each other's eyes. And because we're theatre people rather than film people as our sort of practice, that actually I think would help. It would help with our connection thing that you're talking to, Cassie, I think.
But it is weird because I felt like when we went away, we were inspired by like the tech, if that makes sense. So there is like this weird marriage because we'd be like, oh, we saw that and we saw that, maybe we could do that with that. But I do feel like you need that almost like the wilderness time away from the tech. My brain does anyway, where I'm just like, okay, what was that? And now I'm one with myself and I can think about how to use that. But yeah, I was thinking as well, like with improvising, I feel like I wasn't sure whether when I watched it back, actually, I was like surprised. I was like, there weren't that many moments where we were really like on top of each other all the time with the dialogue. But I did feel like when I hadn't watched the performance, I was thinking, I wasn't sure how much improvising you can do with the dialogue at the moment with where the technology is at, because even in a Zoom conversation or a meeting, like a Microsoft Meetings conversation, when we're all talking over each other, you've got the lag, you've got the, and people might not be able to hear everything. And I think when I spoke to some people and some of my people that came to watch it, they were absolutely amazed with everything and they loved it, and like they were just blown away by it. And they were like even saying things to me like, so how could you see each other, look at each other? Because they found those moments so powerful when we were looking at each other. And I was like, we're just guessing. We had like 3 screens, and my partner, he's an actor, he's just like blown away. He's like, no, like how many marks did you have? I was like, just like 2 on the floor, 3 on the floor. I didn't even use one, and then one point he was like, what? But I did, but like they were like, oh, there was just times that where we couldn't hear everything, and I wondered whether it was because of the lag, and I wondered whether the technology is there for improvising with dialogue, like how we would completely just be like everything can be like off script, like we might have the odd like leading phrases, but how much of it can we improvise with the technology when it comes to dialogue? Was just what I was thinking at the present moment.
Yeah, when I watched it back, I actually thought that we had lots of room for improv, but that we just didn't have enough time. That's all. I think the sense I got with this was that because I think just because of who we are as makers, it would have felt very strange for us to completely focus on the tech. Like we're quite into the content. And so I think that content arm just needs more time, basically, because I think if we'd had literally just one more session of rehearsal, we would have nailed it. I think we got the thing on the day.
Always says today.
I know, fair enough. They're not dealing with our tech. But I felt like
I'd have asked for about 10 more things if we'd have had one more day. I'd gone, could we just try?
Try this. But I'm not gonna lie, I felt quite like, I don't know, I was quite confident throughout the whole thing, like I felt like everybody that was present was like extremely skilled in what they did. And also like there's a combination of like a patience and compassion and creativity, this particular mix of people that I just thought like, I know people are working on this outside of their paid time, and this is going to be fine because I know I was. And every time I was talking to Ange about it, talking to Cassie about it, and even the messages I was getting from Paul, and even seeing Henry at like 7 in the morning, I was like, oh, it's committed. We're committed for sure. Yeah, so absolutely. I think the main thing was the sound thing, which I think was just a matter of the mics that we were using mics of our like laptops and like the camera and stuff, and so if I'm like facing away, like it's gonna get lost and like that, and And then also not that sense of like when you're in the theatre space, right? If you get too comfortable on stage and you're sort of talking to somebody as if they're right in front of you, somebody goes, speak louder. But when you're on your own in your house, nobody goes, speak louder. You don't even know that you're quiet.
I think, I mean, this might be wrong, so Nina, Paul, tell me. When we used vMix for the, we did this like behind this other project, they had mics and we fed the sound into a separate channel, which meant that it wasn't running through like the equivalent of the Zoom software. It was running through a dedicated sound channel, which means it could be mixed. So I think that there will be a technical way of making that work when we take it to like the next level. So obviously you can't do everything in these sessions. So I think it's probably quite good that it wasn't involved in that.
Yeah, sound isn't always subject to the same delay as video. So actually there is probably a separate sound link sort of. I mean, there's been work done with UCL and RADA about having a virtual conservatoire, which means that you have, you know about that, do you, Paul, as well? Yeah. Which is the challenge of trying to get a conductor to be able to conduct an orchestra from one location to the orchestra in the other location, which obviously literally requires zero lag. So it'd be interesting to see whether there's anything that's come out of that.
I think you're right, and I think one of the things, the takeaway here is that we kind of need a sound engineer of some sort on the project.
And music.
You know, it's yeah. It's an area that I certainly am not competent enough in to support, and it's somebody. It's one of the aspects we've learned from this. It'd be really useful. It kind of leads into a question I've got for you. Another question, if I may. I was wondering, in a sense, what you've experienced, beyond theatre, this being a solution to overcome lockdown, are there other uses you can see for the telepresence stage in theatre or even elsewhere, where this sort of thing could be used not only for producing theatre but in other kinds of aspects of your life?
Good question.
I have a very nice green robe I can wear. It's got lots of material.
I think, I mean, in terms of like the digital, I think the tricky thing is the setup at home. Because the idea of being able to step into a digital space is a really exciting idea in terms of when we think about international collaborations and stuff like that, and trying to reduce flying around the world. Like if we had, so one of our projects at Improbable is one of the big dreams is to create a big creation center, and we're a tiny company, but we're an international, like we work internationally a lot. So the idea that we would have like a kind of room there, or there could be spaces in different parts of the world that are already set up with this kit, so that international collaborators could quite easily R&D together, not necessarily because they're going to make something technical, but because they want to feel that they are remotely in a same space to kind of chat or share, or be able to kind of share things like model box showings, or I don't know, things like that, where you want to feel like you're gathered. So I wonder if there's something, but I think the thing that would stop at the moment is at the moment everyone would need green screens and on 3 sides or whatever. But if there were spaces that could accommodate that setup that you could hire effectively, then I feel like that could be a really interesting thing for the creation part of it, not just the that actually make something in it.
Yeah,
I was thinking. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was actually thinking at some point it would be so nice if we were all in the same building, and it was different rooms, just one next to one another, because I also felt like everybody needed their own stage manager actually at some point, because no matter how well it was set up, there was still something to tweak, and we spent a lot of time when we actually should have done other things in still dealing with the green screens, and especially in the mornings. So yeah, I would have loved to be in the same building and just run from room to room and just tweak and have like a generic kind of size of room and setup as well.
I mean, we should also acknowledge that this stuff, these places exist, but they just tend to be outside of our budgets. So there are lots of XR stages around the place and lots of remote conferencing that happens. South by Southwest had a really good virtual environment with headsets, and people could attend remotely and go to bars and sit across the table from each other and have food. We are obviously remembering that we're looking at something on a accessible user kind of theatre scale. You know, we've not got squillions to spend on this and huge sponsors. We're very grateful for the time that, you know, that to be part of this R&D as well with Brighton, because, you know, it's been really, really good. But yeah, just to sort of, you know, say that there are really dramatically big solutions out there. A lot of people are using Fortnite to meet and do shows together, all that sort of thing. So, you know, and in some ways, although I'm always saying that VR is not the right thing for theatre because of the collective experience, that I think only relates, that I should now qualify that by saying, if you're in the same space, then a VR headset is difficult. But then if you are not in the same space, a VR headset is very useful because you are put into the same space. So there's an interesting discovery there, I think.
Yeah, I'm not sure, you know, I'm trying to, I can only sort of, yeah, there's something about the amount of equipment that makes me feel like how does it translate? That's like my main, like you're saying, Catherine. Yeah, I'm not sure, Paul. Yeah. This feels quite, I feel like I'm still like landing in the discovery of it.
Yeah, sure.
Other contexts might suddenly creep up, even as we sort of create fictional scenes. And then I might be like, oh, actually, yeah, I guess, yeah, maybe I could use the chat to my mom or something. Yeah, definitely have to think on that.
Well, I think in terms of what sort of future theatre looks like, and sort of ideas and thoughts we're now having, and what we take away from this. Now we're coming out of lockdown. What do we take away from this? And I think one of the things, another question, perhaps just to finish up, we've got a few more minutes, but it's about future possibilities, but it's also about what that's a slight dilemma in and I think you're aware of it, and some of the conversations with your other participants who joined the show last Friday. But what is that relationship to audience, and how do we try to identify that way of feeling? I mean, I think you did, you know, and it was live. They got it. It was live. It felt live. But what is it that makes this alive? The liveness of this, and what would you want to explore with future engagement, participation, and also also from an international perspective? What does this all throw up for you?
I'm quite like interested in like the stuff that you've worked on before, Paul, like the stuff with the couch and the bed and the drawing, where people were drawing on the same pad from all over the world. I feel like there's a bit of experimentation to be had with a live thing that would like people can like step into or something, where yeah, something is happening on a stage, but somebody could be part of the scene from like their house, or like an audience member could become part of it by, like you said, like we talked about, Angela, when you saw that show where people could go from the online show to like the Instagram to like another platform. I feel like there's some play to be had in like involving live audience members and people who aren't present in almost dropped my mug in the same theatre space. I don't know what it is yet, but it feels like the way that we're layering so many things in so many places already, that there's a possibility of something there.
Yeah, really interesting.
Yeah, I saw a show that was live online, and they had pre-filmed some sections and set up Instagram accounts, and they would tell you to go onto Instagram at certain points, and then you'd watch a bit of backstory on video on your phone, and then rejoin the story online. And they had these Instagram accounts for you to flick through to sort of see what somebody's lifestyle was that was sort of like character background. And so there's some really nice, interesting, interactive things with the audience that I sort of thought was a really playful thing. And but I think one of the, and I also watched some stuff that the Globe did where they asked audience members to bring certain things and put hats on at certain points, or bring weapons with them to become an army at certain points. And I think there's lots of things that you can go down, and obviously all of those things create different atmospheres. So I think one of the things that I really enjoyed with this, and I think would be taken on to another level if we had someone working on sound and creating that, is I think there's a chance to make some really interesting atmospheres. I think, say, like that fireside scene, I think with some sound on it, it could become, I think you could sit in some of these places for a while, which you can do with theatre, where you can slow things down a bit and really get the humanity of something going on. But I think it does need like that layer of sound support on it. And I've sort of whittled on in different directions, so I don't know what my point was.
No, absolutely.
I think there's something really exciting about the idea of how it gets co-created, like the opportunities for that to be done really, really well and genuinely. Like Ade was saying, like you could put things in. Like, I'm not sure that this is this project. Well, it's probably not this project, but like it makes me think about things like you know, when you work with, they're doing a project with around like Narton with young kids in New York, and they've written a piece of music and Anthony's going to sing it, and it's about the kind of ownership of being able to see your work on stage. That if you were doing a project with young people, or you wanted to make a show that was around a particular place or something like that, that it's sort of, you could have people's actual drawings in it. You could have people's, like, maybe pre-arranged, it doesn't have to be like live necessarily, or maybe live, but people could see their work in it in a very direct way that could be really beautiful, I think, and kind of do a really sort of maybe a very literal way of thinking about it, but I think there's something around there's something around that that this technology feels like it could do, because and there's the aesthetic that you guys created, because you've got those layers, and it feels like you, I think your Victorian theatre metaphor really really stuck with me, but I really like it because you can slide it in without that feels very direct, very literal, but really beautiful. I'm not really sure what I mean by that, but it ties into a little bit what we're talking about with Improbable Musical, where you're talking about creating stories that people need to hear in that moment. It's something about that live gatheringness of being together collectively that Nina was talking about, but digitally. Yeah. So there's something about people being able to kind of feed in or have fed in, and then they can see it, that feels like you're connected to people in a circle when you're actually separate. That is quite exciting.
I think that makes me think in the previous R&D, when we were just working on content really, and little bits to do with green screen, we all made stuff or drew stuff, and then we did try somebody's drawing becoming their green screen background. And that, for instance, so if you had someone from the audience drawing something and uploading it, I don't know, somehow, then that could become the background of something. I don't know. I think there's definite possibilities of that. And as you say, suddenly when people feel like they're interacting in that way, there's different. I think there's something about keeping that sort of still feel of the low tech, high tech thing without trying to be too high tech about it is really helpful. Yeah, and I'm just going to say a little bit about what Cassie was saying about impro, and the slight challenge of that, because there's quite a lot of things here that need to be set up, that need to be what's next and things. But I was saying to Ade earlier, I was in a show, an improbable show a long time ago, which was Cinderella, and we knew what scene was coming next, and we knew what we needed in terms of props or what was going to happen. So in terms of visuals, you know what's going to be required, but the content within the scene could be really changed. You just had to reach a certain point by the end of the scene to get there, but actually what happened in there, and sometimes who was in that scene, was a variable. So I think that would be something to look at a little bit. It might be not possible about who's in it, just because I'm thinking again of those layers, but and people wouldn't know where they were. Foreground or background. It's very different when you're making your choices.
I was going to add to that what you've just said, Ange, about that, about the improvising. I thought, actually, wouldn't it be great and also humorous? You know, it's ripe for humour, where the person who's draws is also improvising around the performers. So they are, you know, actively kind of responding to something that they don't know. You know, they'll see it, that obviously there'll be a bit of a delay, but there's a lot to kind of, you know, that's really exciting to be able to say, well, you know, I'm drawing and I can draw something that they don't, you know, that they don't really expect. And how will they respond to that? And I think that's what's really also really exciting, you know, that kind of possibility that you can you know, I mean, it's more difficult obviously for Paul with, you know, like that's going to take me 40 minutes kind of vibe, but you know, but in terms of actually live drawing, it's I think it's quite exciting, you know, to or to be able to, you know, just blob a bit of green paint and get rid of somebody's bottom half or their arm or their, you know, and they kind of, you know, how do you respond to these kind of things that have been added to you or taken away from you? You know, I think that's also really interesting.
You know, we should probably talk to Colin, Ange, and also the people who have done sound design for us on improvised shows, because they are effectively doing a similar job where they have a bunch of stuff that they've set up. Like Colin has, you know, a lighting rig full of lighting stays that he then improvises with. And the sound team have a whole load of sound effects and music bits and that they start feeding in, or like, so what is the kind of, I feel like they would have some good kind of experience to chat through in terms of how do you create that sort of toolkit to improvise with.
Yeah, I think the toolkit thing is really helpful as a sort of an idea, and yeah, having those conversations would be really great. And I know, Ade, you mentioned that you knew a sound person who watched it and was really excited about it, and might be someone that we would look to listen to their music and see if we feel like it's a good fit and stuff. So, but I think the toolkit thing feels, in a way, like I was thinking about you, Nina, and in a way this is a longer conversation, but it's partly this required you watching everything and responding, but there might come a point where you had given us an amount of certain things, if you were interested in working further in this, that became part of the toolkit, that the person who then becomes the director or the stage manager, director, or whatever, the vision person in that way, that they choose when certain things would happen, or those transition filmic things that we put in could happen, and so that there would be some ability for a bit of fluidity here and there. Yeah,
it might be worth like thinking about it sort of in more sort of like, wonder whether there's a sort of more open playing space that can be created, that can kind of can help you guys, give you guys a bit more space, but still create the interest, and you can be in that space for longer, and then it might even be that yeah, I don't know. I mean, we went in and added some really gorgeous detail there, but it also feels like there's a world in which we do it slightly less filmically and more scenically, in the sense that we go, right, let's stay in this space, and the story is more about you than it is about the space in a bit, if that makes sense.
Although I also thought part of the magic, just from watching it without having made it, was the mix. So like the crow flying around, but the locket being moved by hand, for example, was a really beautiful mix of stuff, because it kept you, but it all felt within the same world, but it kept you really surprised, because you're like, oh, the crow flew from scene to scene, or like, you know, whatever, that felt really, that made it feel quite magic, because each thing moved the way it wanted to move through the space, rather than being dictated by the form. That's how it felt.
Yeah. No, I think sorry, I was just going to say, just because of what you both, Nina, and a combination of things that you, people have said, a potential other use of this could be like a regular improv space, like just thinking on a larger scale, if Improbable had these sort of locations, like all over like wherever, as you said, and sure, maybe you needed 3 green screen walls, but they could be pull downs, you know, like on each side of the wall that can go back up, so the space is multi-use. But then it's the kind of thing where like every 2 months or something, there's like an virtual improv space that like people can show up to these rooms in various places in the world. And then maybe there's also like if there could be a place that a Caroline could also slot into. There's an artist slot in that online improv space as well. So you could be like, oh, okay, this week's like you would go to any improv space. This week's theme is this, and this week's artist is this, and like that could become a regular sort of thing. So people are also building up a skill in this space that's probably going to become bigger, like anyway. So that just made me think of that like, oh, actually, in terms of the play, and I think we did all right, to be honest, with the time that we had, like considering when Caroline came in and like had to be like mind blown and then back to work really quickly, and like I feel like actually it was a very improvisational sort of energy, like even though we were trying to like just stick things down so that we could move forward, there was still a lot of like, okay, how about this, oh, like, and even like watching Caroline and Nina collaborate like on the fly, like, and like 15 minutes later we've got crow's wings, and you're just like, what the hell is going on? So yeah, I think actually even with the constraints we had, we managed to squeeze in quite a bit of info anyway. Yeah, but yeah, totally, I'm on the same page as you in that space.
I have to go in a minute, but I'm just thinking about your book, Paul. I love the book. Can you please tell me what your book is that you used?
Of course, I will. I will show you. I will send it to you. I'll send you a picture of it. The publisher can search it out.
Yes, please. And also, thank you so much, Paul, for putting those transitions and filming those. I know that everyone else sort of, we're in that world, we sort of know what the gig is in a way. I think this has been quite different for you in terms of what you've done on other Telepresence stage.
Absolutely.
And that's been fantastic that you've just stepped in and done that. We appreciate it, because as you could tell, we were all sort of lots of ideas and lots of, oh, but can we try this, and lots of that, and we really appreciate you entered into that spirit, because that was a different thing. Maybe we could ask you how that was for you, and what that difference was for you.
I was just thinking about this as you were talking away. I was thinking that you've been working with yourselves. I think having the opportunity to work with such a wide range of diverse skills and experience in different areas is rather like working with a kind of, I'm not an experimental jazz fan of any sort, but it's rather like how I imagine jazz musicians talk about improvisation with jazz, that they all sort of come together and they kind of just know where it sort of locks in and where it works, and it felt like that for me. It felt like you all kind of had a language and a kind of like there was a kind of intuition that I really was getting, that it was just, this was coming together between you all, and that was great. And I think it's partly that you're still learning the instruments, of course, but you're like a tight sort of jazz improvisation ensemble. I really enjoyed working with that. And as I said, I think there's, back to what Cassie was saying earlier on about not feeling too comfortable with the technology. Well, it's just kind of learning the instruments and what we're playing with, and I think it's really exciting to see that happen, and the way you work. So I really enjoyed it.
Awesome. How about you, Tom?
Sorry, unmute my mic. Yeah, I mean, I think you've achieved a fantastic amount in a short space of time. And I was reflecting back on the first days when I came to help set up, and how new it was. You've really explored the space and what you can do with it to a very high level. Congratulate you on that. It was amazing. It was a great performance, all the mix you put into it. And there's, we were talking about technology earlier there, and there's a lot, with an unlimited budget, yes, there's an awful lot more you could put into it, but it would be expensive. So yeah, you've pushed really a long way with what you've got. Well done.
Cool. Great.
Great stuff. Let's stay in touch, stay in contact, and we are looking to create some. I'll just very briefly tell you, I will be applying for some more what we call follow-on funding, and hopefully I would like to take this project into an exhibition of some sort, where we set up a kind of a green screen installation and allow the public to just play and explore with this space. And within that exhibition, I would like to have all the sorts of material that we've recorded, your full-length performance, presented as well, and maybe we'll turn our case studies into a catalogue. It's all hopeful. So that's what we're looking for now, and to apply for more funding to do that. But hopefully a good venue, somewhere with a kind of museum and gallery venue, London-based or Manchester Lowry Theatre sort of things, places where they have museums and galleries together. That sort of public-facing, sort of impactful environment.
That sounds great. If we can support your funding bids in any way, let me know.
Thank you, Catherine. I'll be coming back to you on that one.
Yeah. And then
little letter of support always helps.
Yeah. Equally, and Dane, I haven't had a chance to have a conversation, or even let alone with everybody else. But I think it would be. I certainly am really excited about this project and everything that was achieved in the last bit, and the hope was always that this would be the first bit of exploration of a kind of bigger project for Outside the Frame to kind of keep it going, and the kind of marriage of the ideas and the technology seemed great. So hopefully we'll also be seeking funding for whatever our next bit of this is going to be. So I will, I'm sure, be back in touch with you in the next few weeks.
Of course, anything I can help with that one, just ask, and I can give you all the information and things we've gathered. Please do. It's there to share. Fantastic. I'll let you go. I've got to go to another interview PhD student now. So there we are. Different thing altogether. That's my life.
I still want us to do this seaside effort. It looks like it might be. Did you say, Nina, was there around the 13th of June? Have I made that up? Or is somebody
I get back then, yeah. But someone else goes away.
I posted something to say the 18th or the 19th, because that's after Nina gets back. So could we do the 19th? Because I've realised I've got something on the 18th. But if the 19th is cool with everyone, 19th.
I'm away on the 19th. Are you coming to Brighton?
Yeah.
Yes.
Damn, I'm away on the 19th.
Yeah, I can't do the 19th either.
God damn
Okay.
it.
Damn,
We'll
it's
figure
long.
it out.
We're going to
Okay.
have to do a doodle poll.
Yeah,
let's doodle poll and
like 70.
get
Do that.
I don't know how to do that. Somebody else.
I'll
do
it.
Better day. Thank
Right.
you.
Okay.
I would love to join you on the beach.
For sure, we'll send it to everyone here,
yeah.
for sure.
Yeah,
Great.
even things like our usual meeting days
Let's
are
celebrate.
Friday as well, so maybe we should look at that as an option as well.
Yeah, the 17th.
Could
even,
you
yeah.
maybe.
make sure that Henry's on that list? It's just I think
For
Henry's
sure.
on one of the email chains, and as a result, sometimes we'd not get a meeting thing. So just
Yeah.
to make sure that when we do
I'll
that,
include
that
everyone.
Henry's on. Yeah.
Yeah. If it's,
Sorry about
That
that.
sounds like a great plan.
If it's a
I'm gonna-
Friday as well, that's cool.
Okay.
Friday.
I'm just going to take
Wonderful.
2 seconds to take a screenshot, if everyone doesn't mind.
Go for it. Go for it.
Okay. 3, 2, 1. Yay. Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much again. I wish you all the best.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
lovely, have a lovely weekend. And
Well
great,
done,
great fun,
everyone.
great fun.
Thank
Lovely.
you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Joyful.
Bye-bye.
Really joyful. Cheerio.